Oh, so hey, everybody from Koinonia Church and also the Facebook world. We are live right now. We are doing what we call the daily here at Koinonia. And this is really just a way for us to engage throughout the week. So we want to engage in a couple different ways. Yesterday, Pastor Christian was on here, and you guys got to pray for half an hour. And today, I'm going to be actually going through a sermon discussion. We're going to talk about a few different things from this past Sunday's teaching from Pastor Andrew. And then tomorrow, Pastor Brian's going to be on here, and he's going to lead us in a time of worship. And on Friday, Pastor Andrew's going to be taking us through a deeper study. But I wanted to just kind of give you guys a heads up because this Friday is our all-church prayer. So please, if you're a part of Koinonia Church, we want you to be there. Go to the caseyhanford.com and you'll find the link to the all-church prayer. And then lastly, today, like I said, we're going to be talking about the sermon this past Sunday. And I invited two special people. I love both of these people very much. I could already hear them giggling. It's kind of interesting right now because I'm on a camera, but I can't really see them, and I can't see my own facial expressions. So we'll see how this goes. It's going to be an interesting conversation because I'm kind of flying blind here. With that said, I have invited two of my favorite people. One is my wife, Caitlin Fagundes, and the other one is Michael Cortez. Caitlin and I have been married for 7 years, and this year will be our 8th. And then my buddy Mike, of course, you guys probably know him as Candace's husband, Pastor Candace's husband. But he also has a career as a deputy at the sheriff's office. And we've actually been friends way before he knew Candace. Right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yep. And he might give a lot of short answers today that I'm going to fill in the gaps for. But we've known each other since high school and have been really good friends ever since. So let's get started. Okay, so Pastor Andrew, we're going to talk about, Pastor Andrew went through this series called Factory Reset. And during this series, he challenged us about the whole concept of the idea of resetting all the way back to starting over. But one thing that kind of stuck with me that just has been echoing through my ears ever since Sunday was the idea of like having a reset without a change is actually, it equals a repeat. And I've been challenged to just kind of think through some of the life lessons that I've learned in this last season and to actually be intentional about applying those as I go into this next year. And so I guess our first question, actually, you guys should say hello, right? Like, do we see them? I think we see you guys live. But let's introduce, if you guys want to say something, go ahead.
Hi.
Hello. Perfect.
Hello.
Hello is
Hey,
perfect.
everybody.
They're
That's all
kind
you get.
they're kind of nervous and they're reluctant to kind of be a part of this, but thankfully they said yes after me kind of pestering them about it because it's kind of nerve-wracking being live because we might say something accidentally, which it'll probably be more so me than anything else that will just get us kicked out of certain social circles. But hopefully that doesn't happen today and that everything runs smoothly. But hey, I wanted to give you guys a chance to we're going to start off by just saying, just like I kind of pinpointed something that stuck out to me this past Sunday. Is there anything that Pastor Andrew said this weekend that has just kind of stuck with you and just quick, it could be quick to your memory? We'll start off with Kate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought there was a lot of good stuff that came from Andrew this week. One of the things that really stuck out to me was he said, and I wrote it down, it says, it's not all talk, not all action, but it influences your entire life. And he's talking about faith. And says, when you are engaged with your faith, others cannot help but catch it. And I really dug that statement.
And why did you dig it?
Well, because it just, it makes me reflect on my life and you know, how I'm living it. Like you said, it's not always what I say, but not always what I do. It's just how I am. It's inside of me, and it's how am I showing that to others with my actions, with my day to day, and just kind of reflected back on that.
Yeah. All right, Mike, it's your turn. What do you got for us?
So so for me, what stuck out to me was kind of just the whole. I guess just it's a summary of what he was talking about. The whole thing, just taking it back to the basics.
Yeah.
So what I got out of that was like, what are the staples of my faith, and like why do I believe that? And if I believe that, where did I hear it from? Did I
Sure.
read it in the Bible? Did I receive a revelation from God? That this is His will, or is it just something that I heard and it
Yeah.
sounded good, and I just kind of
Adopted
put
it.
that, yeah, adopted that
Yeah.
in with everything else without
Sure.
without even fully trying to examine if that is really, where can I find that in the Bible? Is that something where I can verify that that's actually something that I should be believing? Um,
Yeah.
so it was really challenging.
Yeah. Why do you believe what you believe, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
a big part because, like, in our early 20s or when my early 20s, I was challenged with the same thought. And well, that same thought is going to challenge us the rest of our lives because there is adopted behavior we can have or adopted theological thoughts just because we've been around it for so long, right?
Yeah.
And it really becomes more like a parrot, right? Like we've parroted these ideas rather than actually letting them come from what we actually believe and why we believe it. So I think that's a healthy thing to always struggle with. Like we should never forget about that, right?
Yeah.
So just for the sake of this conversation, I know as Pastor Andrew kind of put his sermon together, he followed the structure of our church vision statement. And do you guys know what that is?
Yes.
Yes.
We could stick with that. So do one of you guys
I'll
want
give you
to
the
give it
first.
a,
I'll give you the first three, or the first three words of it.
what's
Igniting
that?
contagious faith.
Kate, can you finish that?
Gosh, I can't remember. Igniting contagious faith in the one who
True God.
restores. Dang, now I
You
know it.
hey,
You
you
know, I'm being
almost
put on the spot. It's
yeah,
making me like, ugh.
you
It's I
almost
don't.
you almost had it. So it's igniting contagious faith in the one God who restores all.
Oh God, who restores
Yeah.
all. I knew it. I should know it.
Yeah,
I should.
no, you do know it. I like putting you guys on the spot, and that might happen a couple more times as we go through some of this stuff. But so Andrew kind of structured his sermon around the first three words, right? The igniting, the contagious, and the faith. And he started off
Mm-hmm.
with the faith, and he essentially presented us a question that challenged us with examining ourselves. And this idea actually comes from 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5. And it says, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? Unless, of course, you fail the test. And so it's this idea of like kind of doing some heart checks, right? Some internal checks. And so I know it's not the easiest question, but what are some ways that you guys examine your faith? Mike, we'll start with you.
So this past week, I had a really difficult conversation with some friends about faith, and it challenged me, because I've been privately, I'm in KSM, so Koinonia School of Ministry,
Yeah.
and I've been doing that the last 6 months. So I've learned a lot of things, about just basic principles of our faith and things like that. So privately, I've been getting a better understanding of what I believe and why I believe it. But to do it publicly, I'm not a very good public speaker, and speaking in front of people is difficult for me.
That's why I
Um,
picked you.
I know. So to do that with something that, um, I don't know, to do that with my faith, because the people I was talking to, weren't necessarily, practicing the same faith that I am,
Yeah.
and why I believe those things, and it was very challenging to have that pushback, and
Yeah.
it gave me perspective. It's like maybe I don't really know why I believe that, or I don't really know like what is a good definition of what what we consider sin.
Sure.
What I don't know, just some of the basic things that you kind of just gloss over. I guess, or I guess I did glossed over and
Yeah.
kind of just took for granted that, well, I understand what sin is, but can I put that in words and explain that to somebody?
Yeah.
So
So
it was difficult to say the least.
sure. So like part of your examining is like that whole thing that you started off with, right? Is like asking yourself that internal question
Yeah.
of, man, why do I believe this, and picking at those things, right? I think that's a healthy thing. I think people hold on to some of their beliefs because there's fear there, right? And you shouldn't ever fear that one day you're going to lift up. I heard this from Pastor Jeff one time. That you shouldn't be afraid that one day you're going to pick up a rock and discover something that's bigger than God. And it's this idea of like, we shouldn't be afraid, right, to pick at some of these traditions that have been around for so long, especially when they don't make sense. Because one of two things have to happen, right? They're either they're not the right thought, or we haven't been applying these things correctly, right? And so reconciling those things with so they in a way that make give us understanding. But yeah, definitely examining yourself and asking yourself those hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have another one, or is that the one you want to stick with?
That's the one I'm going to stick with. You're not going to get too many answers out of
Okay.
me.
Oh, I'm gonna pull them out. And then
All right.
Kate, how did so what are some ways that you kind of examine your faith?
So Andrew said something in his message that really kind of hit for me as well when it comes to like examining my faith. And he said that if you exercise your fears and anxiety, if you are exercising your fears and anxieties, your faith will be upside down. And that is something that I've dealt with, fear and anxiety, not only when it comes to like relationships and my relationship with God, but just other things in general. And so I know that when I'm letting those things like rule over me, and maybe saying no to opportunities that have been placed in front of me that I believe are by God, and I'm saying no to that, then I feel like that's when I could see that my faith maybe is suffering and I'm not maybe in a good place
Sure.
emotionally and relationshiply. I don't think that's a word. I made it up.
We
Relationshiply. Sorry, teachers
just
of English.
I'm probably the wrong person to ask those type of questions. So
Yeah, but so when I see that I'm trying to be in a season of where I'm being mindful of the things that God is placing in my life and saying yes to those opportunities,
yeah,
because I want to be led in that way, and I really want 2021 to be a year of me like pushing forward into that, because I feel like 2019 for me personally was not a great year.
yeah,
With God, with my relationship with God. And since 2020 started, even though 2020 has kind of sucked,
yeah,
it's been a building year for me. And I just want to keep that going in this next year.
yeah. And I think I mean, that's a powerful kind of revelation you came to. It just being mindful, and I think that kind of sums up honestly, kind of both of yours, is like this idea of like not just being hitting autopilot, but being mindful of the things that are either driving our lives or being mindful of some of our beliefs and why we believe those things. Now, there's all kinds of there's all kinds of things we can do to examine our faith. I think one of the traps that I want to kind of mention is we have to be careful with some of these external metrics that because they are limited, right? Because we could do some of these things that examine our faith, like, hey, am I reading my Bible? Am I doing some of these spiritual disciplines like praying, doing, reading, journaling, whatever you call a spiritual discipline? Am I doing these things? Or if you're just taking time to recognize certain things. There is people that fell into the trap of doing all these external checks, but it became legalistic, right? Isn't that like kind of like the Pharisees struggled with? Like they were doing all the things that represented faith, but there was this internal change that didn't happen for them. And so when we come to this, I think there's like we have to hold this examining kind of loose in the sense of like at the end of the day, this is an internal check, right? So some of these external things or behavior modifications, like we have to be careful because that doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy, right? It doesn't necessarily if you're praying but you're not connecting with the Father, right? So Kate, you and I talked about this about like having this, you could have quantity without quality. And you could pray every single day for 5 minutes and think that you're doing all right, but you've never experienced had this experience with Christ. You're not like interacting with Him. You're not getting a touch from Him, and I think that's an important thing. Actually, Pastor Tim, did you guys get on Facebook at all this morning? Pastor Tim, who is our old lead pastor, he wrote like this little devotional. And I wrote something, this kind of goes along with what at the very end he wrote something. He says, when a person positions himself or herself before God and remains in His presence long enough to experience a real conversation and connection, that's when he or she will receive this renewed grace for today. And it's this idea of like that whole like having quality time with God, even if sometimes it's not necessarily like every single day. It's quality. Anyways, just be careful with that because I think behaviors can be indicators of of who you are as a person, but the real test that examines whether you're in the faith is rooted in our relationship with Christ. And after we get done talking, I'll actually put some stuff in the chat where I read this article about a couple tests you can do, and there's some questions you could ask yourself to kind of start that examining process. But with that, we're going to continue the conversation because I don't want to take up all the time because I know you guys have some really good answers for the next couple questions. So I can't see your face. Are you guys nervous right now?
No.
You are? Okay. Like I said, you have to describe.
I've been nervous the entire time. It hasn't changed.
You can't see it, but Mike's legs are probably shaking uncontrollably right now.
I have an uncomfortable smile.
Yes.
Oh man, I'm gonna definitely go back and watch this so I could crack up and laugh. So yeah, following kind of his sermon outline, the next thing he talked about was being contagious, right? Which is kind of a hot button word right now. Being contagious, but the whole concept of like before you just look at you can't cough, Kate, when we're talking about being contagious. You got the vid. All right, so so the whole concept of being contagious, right? Like first you have to be infected, you have to have the disease before you can be that. And so this kind of the times we're living in right now, our whole MO lately, right, is to not be contagious to people, to make sure that you're washing your hands, that you're having your face mask on, that you're staying socially distanced and stuff like that. So it kind of inspired this next question. What are some ways you think that our contagious faith can actually become sterilized? Kate, we'll start with you. Give Mike a couple more seconds to catch his breath.
So I think like for me, it's like when we're like focusing on like other things or distracted by other things. Like I mentioned, 2019 was a hard time for me, and I think I love my son. We have a son who was born at the end of 2018, and so he was an infant throughout 2019, and so there was a big struggle for me as a mom with like nursing and him not sleeping. My relationship with God was really not where I wanted it to be, just because I was so overwhelmed with everything going on. And so I really think like that could be, not saying that I don't want to be like dissing moms, like just because you're a mom. I mean, I struggled with it. That was something that I struggled with.
Sure.
So I think when you're focusing not just on babies, but maybe on other things like stressful at work or marriage issues or just in general worldly things, whether it be money, vacations, like you can get sterilized in that kind of way. So when your attention is taken away from God, that can inhibit being contagious.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I heard a long time ago is that like being a Christian is this simple, is paying attention and responding, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he kind of touched on that first part of that, is like sometimes we can be so focused on other things, and not just focused, like distracted, right? The enemy is scheming against us, and we can be distracted so much that God is over here like trying to get our focus to go do this and lead us in this way because he's leading us to life, but we just don't see it. So I think that's a really good thing. Pay attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard, like that has to be intentional, like to pay attention, because it can be difficult sometimes when someone is yelling in the corner of the room, right? Mike, let's hear from you. Download your wisdom upon us.
Yeah. So for me, I know personally one of my biggest weaknesses is I really enjoy being comfortable. And I think
Sure.
that's most people enjoy comfort, but I will allow myself to stay there, and I won't examine like what's happening, because I feel good. I feel comfortable. It doesn't feel like anything needs to change because I'm happy.
Yeah.
So just taking the gospel for granted, I guess, and not putting myself in those uncomfortable situations. Um, just
Yeah.
kind of distancing myself and not having I don't know, my faith or my beliefs be something that I regularly talk about. Um, I don't know. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I tend to shy away from that, and so I'm not infecting others.
Well, you're going to be becoming infectious right now because I know this is super uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
Um, and as you were talking, I was thinking about some scriptures like in Ephesians where it was like a call to almost wake up and to pay attention, which is kind of the
Mm,
same concept as Kate. We can get stuck in our own world, and not even well. It's not even like I don't think that kind of goes against disobedience, but kind of, right? Because it's like you're not even attempting to ask to be obedient, right? Like you're not
mm,
asking, and that really can. Like I think of the passage. I wrote it down here because I was thinking of some stuff of some things that can sterilize our faith, and I wrote down, of course, unrepented sin. I think sometimes hearing the praises of others about your spirituality, right? You can almost put that as a
yeah.
badge of honor, which can lead to kind of like to this pride. And then, of course, disobedience. In Ephesians 3, it says this, Ephesians 3:18 through 19, it says, "And whom did he swear," talking about God to his people, "that would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient. And to see, and so we see that those who were not able to enter because of unbelief." And it's like Ephesians is like relating these two things, disobedience with unbelief. And so we can also assume on the other side, just from that passage, that of course obedience leads to faith. And that idea is not just taken out of seeing the opposite of this passage, but all through Romans, Paul uses this Greek term, which I can't remember, but I remember that what it meant is like faith is obedience and obedience is faith. And it's like if we want to make sure that our faith is growing, like we need to start saying yes to God. First of all, we need to start listening. We need to start asking the question, Father, what do I do? And then having the courage to say yes. If you are struggling with your faith today, take some time, right? Take some time to say, God, I'm listening. What should I do? What is a step that I need to take today? And wait for it till you hear it, get your journal, write it down, and just say yes to that very thing. It might be as simple as like, read a passage in the Bible, or go out and talk to or go pray for somebody that is hurting. Whatever that is, it's just like if we got better at just saying yes. I mean, can you imagine just some of the things that we would experience? Anyways, they're giving me the 5-minute mark here, so I'm going to go down to the next one because I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. But So that whole, the first thing, examining our faith, and then that things that can sterilize, that was kind of like the pros and cons. And this next part, igniting, Andrew gave this illustration of building a fire and making sure that the kindling was positioned in a way and that you had enough and you had the right kinds in a way to kind of fan the flames. And he used a scripture that from Timothy, where it talked about, Paul was talking to Timothy, and he says, fan into flame this gift of God. And of course, the symbol for the Holy Spirit in our life is the power and presence of God in our life is this fire, right? Which empowers us, purifies us, and purifies us. So kind of continue to that. What are some things that you guys do to stoke your faith fire? Go.
Okay. So I think for me, a really big thing is relationships.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert and I'm quiet. And so making new friends or creating new relationships can be difficult for me. So especially like right when I moved back home from college, that was difficult. Because a lot of my friends had moved away. I'd still had some friends here, which was really great. But cultivating relationships with other believers, I think, is really important. I'm lucky now to have some really key women in my life that I can turn to and talk to, that we try to meet regularly and talk just about the things going on. And they really are helpful in keeping me going and speaking and encouraging me in my life. And I'm lucky also, I guess, to have a husband who is also a believer.
I made her say
So,
that.
no, he didn't. So it's really cool to be able to like share things with you at home, that I have that those relationships built and fortified in my life. Because I think that's important, that we are, encouraging each other and being there for each other, because that's how we can grow.
Totally. We need each other. And if you don't think you need someone, like, the truth is that you can make it on your own for a while, but there will be a day when you realize that you need a community around you. And so the best thing to do is just to set up those communities before you need them, right? And because there's a lot more benefits to them than when you're in a desperate need, but they're very helpful when you are in a need, because we all struggle with hearing God. We all struggle with being obedient to God. And if you can get in the right circles, right, it goes back to an old thing that we've heard from our parents, we've heard from our teachers, that whole expression of like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so you hit it on the head with that. All right, Mike, we're going to finish out with your words. How do you stoke your faith fire?
So I thought my first answer was pretty good, so I'm gonna just build off that one.
Sure.
So for me, it's just really just going back to the basics, reading my Bible and praying, just trying to build my relationship with God, because ultimately that's where the fire comes from.
Yeah.
So just trying to improve that relationship in any way that I can, and build on that. Because I mean, receiving revelation from God is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Receiving a word from God is very exciting.
Yeah.
And for me, that's when I'm the most on fire. So
Yeah.
I try to it's encouraging to me to not have to, and to not have to, we don't have to have a blind faith.
Sure.
We have the source of the answers, who has the answers for us. We just have to be willing to maybe be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes to go find those answers.
Yeah. It's so funny how simple our answers are, right? Like, but a lot of times it's not about like us having this like revelation when it comes to like, how do you do this? It's just kind of like reminders of like how important these key things are. And you guys both hit on the head, right? Get to know God, hear from God yourself, and then get people around you that are doing the same thing, and that will begin to build momentum. in your life. And so we're about to end here in a second. I just want to tie things up in a bow. I wrote down 3 things as you guys were talking about, 3 things that will kind of give you that contagious faith. And the first one is, like Mike said, start with God. Don't start with you. Don't think about your failures. Don't think about those types of stuff, but just really begin to develop that relationship with God by reading scripture is a great way, right? Like saturating yourself in those kind of things. Getting to know who he is through scripture, and so that you can learn the language of God, so you can start hearing those internal pulls as well. And then finally, be determined to obey. Man, just obey. If you feel like you heard something from God, if you feel like he's pulling you in a certain direction, like even if you're like halfway sure, if you're just kind of sure, just obey. Do that thing, because one of the best ways to hear God, one of the best ways to develop your faith is through trial and error. So go do that thing. And then lastly, this is a big one, leave the results up to God. It's not about results, it's about obedience. At the end of the day, we're not going to look back. You're not going to stand in front of God and say, I've done this, this, and this. Oh, here comes I hear a timer going off. That means they want me to wrap up. But the final thing is, like, at the end of the day, you're not going to stand before God and say, God, I accomplished this, I did that, or I did this. You're going to stand before them and say, God, I was obedient to what you asked me to do. And that's the only true fruit that's going to last. And so be obedient with that. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kate. I owe you guys a big one. I feel loved that you would even be on here and share some of your thoughts. And I am just deeply honored that you guys are a part of my circle. Love you guys.
Love you too.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh. There's music. I was going to do that, but I heard music.
Hold on. We're still sort of on.
Oh, we're still sort of on. I'm sure Mike and Candace, you guys can jump off, but I just wanted to, as we do end, hey, don't forget about All Church Prayer this Friday. And of course, the daily is happening every day this week at noon. And so we're doing that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Jump on at noon on Facebook and follow along with us. But I would also like to see you guys at the All Church Prayer. Get the link at caseyhanford.com. All right, we're really going this time.